"We're putting you in a home, Mom. We can't go on like this." He didn't shout it, didn't even say it angrily. He said it as if he were announcing he was taking out the trash. I stood in the kitchen, the dish towel still in my hands, the water boiling in the kettle, the smell of toast hung in the air, and yet everything froze. Vivian, my daughter-in-law, leaned in the doorway, not speaking a single word, but her silence co-signed every syllable. She had her arms crossed, her mouth twisted, and her eyes fixed on me, as if waiting for me to break down. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't argue. I just lowered my gaze, then raised it to the window. Outside, the sun fell pale on the withered plants in the garden. For the first time, I felt like one of those brown leaves ready to let go. I never would have thought I would hear that in my own kitchen. Leonard didn't wait for my answer, turned, and walked down the hall, as if he had just finished an unpleasant task. Vivian shot me a fleeting glance, one of those looks that hide poison in every lash, and followed him silently. I remained standing alone. The clock showed 7:32 in the morning, but for me, the day was already over. I went silently up the stairs. Every step creaked under my feet, as if it too were protesting. Arriving in my room, I closed the door carefully. I sat on the edge of the bed. I heard the coffee maker start up in the distance, Vivian's quick steps in the kitchen, Leonard's murmuring on the phone. They were organizing their plans without me. I opened the drawer of my nightstand. The blue velvet cloth still lay carefully folded inside. I ran it through my fingers until I found it. The silver pendant with the small amethyst in the center. It wasn't valuable, had no market value, but for me, it was the most precious memory of all. I hadn't worn it in decades, not even looked at it. But that morning, something inside me urged me to take it. I held it up to the window light, and for a moment my mind wandered far, far away. I had been 19 years old when I received it. It was on a rainy afternoon under the awning of a forgotten cafe downtown. He gave it to me with a shyness I had never seen in his eyes before. His name was Darin. He had a quiet voice and lips that tasted of coffee. He was a year older than me and was studying law. I wanted to become a literature professor. Our love was short, but so intense that it grew deep roots. My parents disapproved of it. They said he wasn't the boy for me. And like so many other things in my life, I obeyed, pulled away, married the one they told me to, did the right thing. Years later, when I saw Darin crossing the street in front of the school where I taught, I didn't dare call out to him. He didn't see me either, or pretended not to see me. He walked past and disappeared, but he never completely disappeared. The sound of a closing door brought me back to the present. I put the pendant away. There was no point in holding on to memories. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face I saw wasn't mine. It had my eyes, yes, but not my soul. My soul had fallen asleep, as if it had been waiting for something that never came. I stood up, went to the wardrobe, looked for a simple gray, long-sleeved dress. I combed my hair, put on the pearl earrings I saved for special occasions, and went downstairs. No one was home. Vivian must have been at the supermarket. Leonard at his practice. The cleaning lady, who came on Thursdays, hadn't arrived yet. The house was silent. I prepared a tea. I drank it slowly. Every sip burned me more internally than externally. And then I opened my notebook, the one I kept hidden behind the cookbooks, the one I had been writing in for years without anyone knowing. I wrote the date, Tuesday, May 6th, and began to write. Today my son said he would put me in a home. He said it without batting an eye, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He didn't ask if I wanted to, offered no alternatives. He simply decided, because he can, because I am no longer his mother. Now I am a burden, a piece of furniture that is in their way in the dining room. I kept writing. The words flowed on their own, as if my fingers no longer needed permission. What did I do wrong? Was it raising a son who was too obedient or too cowardly to stand up to his wife? When did I stop being the mother and become the old woman who sleeps in the back room? By lunchtime I had already written 4 pages, but I ate nothing. My hunger was gone. Vivian came back with bags, glanced at me furtively. She said nothing. Leonard came back at 7 o'clock as always. He didn't even greet me. I ate dinner alone, washed my dishes, retreated to my room, and before I turned out the light, I opened the drawer again. I touched the pendant one last time that evening and decided, for the first time in years, to wear it. I didn't know exactly why, but something told me I should, as if someone would see it. Wednesday dawned overcast. I went for an early walk. The park was almost empty. Just a few children with their grandparents and a few women exercising. I sat on my usual bench, closed my eyes, and then I heard a deep, calm voice. Hilda. I opened my eyes, saw him standing in front of me. Gray hair, deeper wrinkles, the same cologne as always. It was him, Darin. I stood up so slowly as if the world were moving in slow motion. He smiled at me. I couldn't say anything, just raised my hand to my throat and touched the pendant. He didn't ask if he could sit down. He just did, as if no time had passed, as if I were the same 19-year-old girl with whom he shared warm coffees and promises we could never keep. I didn't know what to say. I had so many words in reserve that suddenly none came to mind. Darin looked at me silently, as if he too were recognizing the pieces of a puzzle he couldn't remember assembling. After a few seconds, he smiled with that slight curve he always had in the right corner of his mouth. "Are you still wearing the pendant?" he said. I nodded, not knowing if I was lying. I had kept it for decades. I had hidden it like someone who hides a letter they don't want to read but also can't throw away. I wore it that morning, not knowing he would appear. Or maybe I did know. In an old corner of my heart, something had ignited the day before. We stayed there, on that old wooden bench that was already creaking, and watched the wind move the dry leaves at our feet. He told me about his life. He had married, of course, 3 children, divorced years ago. He lived in Denver, but came to the city often to visit a sick sister. "I never saw you again," he said quietly, as if it were an apology. "Once I thought I saw you crossing a street, but I wasn't sure and didn't want to disturb you." I smiled sadly. It was me. I had seen him and said nothing. Not a word. What can you say when you encounter the ghost of all that never was? He was silent too. He understood my silence just like he used to. It was always like that. He knew me better than anyone else. He knew me better than the man I was married to for almost 40 years, and more than my son. Much more. He was the one who broke the pause. "Would you like to have lunch with me tomorrow? At the place with the blue glass windows? It's still there. You know." I pressed the pendant between my fingers, nodded, and for a moment, something inside me began to beat again, as if I had gotten back a part I thought I had lost. I returned home with a confused heart. Leonard wasn't there, neither was Vivian. The cleaning lady had left a note saying she didn't feel well and had left early. I ate something light. I showered. I sat down with the notebook on my knees. "Today I saw him," I wrote. After so many years he appeared as if the universe had heard my faintest thoughts. He hadn't changed that much. He had more wrinkles, yes, but his gaze was the same. His voice still found its way to parts of me I had forgotten existed. I closed the notebook. I didn't want to write anymore, not that night. The next day dawned cold. I dressed carefully, as if it were a ritual. It wasn't vanity, it was respect for myself, for what I was, for what I could still be. I put on a light coat, the flat shoes I hadn't worn in a long time, and a soft scarf. As I walked through the kitchen, Leonard watched me furtively from the table. Vivian stirred her coffee listlessly. "Where are you going so dressed up?" he asked, with that tone that had hidden barbs. "To lunch," I said. I wasn't lying, didn't explain, didn't ask for permission. I looked at them for the first time in years without lowering my eyes. She fell silent, and that was enough. Darin was waiting for me by his car, leaning casually like a teenager. The restaurant was still in the same place, although more modern, with less charm, but the windows still had those blue panes of glass, like little pieces of sky trapped in the glass. We talked, ate, laughed, and then walked through downtown like 2 old people who owed time nothing. He asked me about Leonard. I avoided going into detail. I said he was a doctor, married, had a busy life. But he looked at me with those eyes that didn't swallow excuses. "And you? Are you okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. I lowered my gaze. That was enough. We said goodbye with a hug, a long one of those that sound like farewell but smell of promise. When I returned, the house was silent. In the kitchen, on the table, a folded sheet of paper. I opened it. It was a proposal for a nursing home. Photos, prices, location, recommendations. It was signed at the bottom in quick letters. "We just want what's best for you." I left it there. I went to my room, closed the door, sat down in front of the notebook again. I wrote angrily, "They have decided. It's already done." They didn't ask, didn't suggest, just imposed. Because they can. Because they believe I am invisible. But I am not. Not anymore. The hours passed slowly. In the evenings, I didn't eat with them. I stayed in my room. I reread old letters. I looked for a box I had kept with things from Leonard's childhood. Drawings, little notes, memories that now hurt more than they were worth. And then I stopped at a photo. I was sitting on a park bench. He, barely 7 years old, was hugging me from behind. His smile was pure, his gaze clear. When had he become so tainted? The next morning I waited until they had left. I took my time, prepared a coffee, opened the kitchen window, let the fresh air in, and then dialed the number Darin had given me. "Would you like to have dinner tonight?" I asked. His voice sounded surprised, but happy. Yes, of course. That afternoon I felt strangely alive, as if every movement, every step had a new meaning. I put on a dark, simple, but elegant dress. I put on the pendant, thin hoop earrings, perfume behind my ears, and just as I was about to leave, there was a knock at the door. I thought it was Vivian or maybe Leonard. I went to the front door. When I opened it, I saw no one, just a male figure a few meters away, walking toward the high gate, in a dark gray, well-pressed suit. In his hand, a small briefcase. He stopped. He turned to me. He smiled. "Mrs. Hilda Schwartz, correct?" I nodded. My voice trembled. "I was sent to speak with you. It's about the documents for the retirement home. There are some details we need to review." I didn't answer. I didn't move. I froze. The man, without losing his smile, pulled out a leather folder, opened it. "It won't take longer than 15 minutes. We just need your signature to process the application. Your son has already approved everything." My whole body tensed. I looked at the street. Darin had to be arriving soon. I looked at the man again. His face remained friendly, professional, soulless. "I will not sign anything," I said finally. He blinked. "Mrs. Schwartz, this is already in process. All that's missing is your consent. You don't have to read everything if you don't want to. These are standard terms." "I will not sign," I repeated louder this time. The man closed the folder, uncomfortable. He handed me a card. "Think it over. You can call me when you are ready." He left without another word. 5 minutes later, Darin arrived. When he saw me, he knew something was wrong, but he didn't ask. He simply offered me his arm, and I took it. We had dinner at a small, discreet place, a simple diner with checkered tablecloths and warm soup. He told me about his sister, about a trip he was planning, and then he looked me in the eyes and said something I hadn't expected. "If you ever decide to leave this house, you have a place you can stay." I didn't know what to say. I just looked at him and felt for the first time in years that I had a choice, an escape, a life. We drove back in silence. As I got out of the car, he held me back. "Don't let them erase you, Hilda." I nodded. That night, I slept with the pendant like a shield, like a promise, and I dreamed. I dreamed of a house by the sea with open windows, with books, with coffee, with a life that belonged to me, only me. The next morning, I went into the kitchen earlier than usual. No sunlight was falling through the windows yet, just that grayish light that announces the start of a new day. I prepared a coffee and sat at the head of the table, as my mother always did when she wanted to be heard. The silence was thick. I felt strange, as if the air were full of electricity. Leonard came down first, phone in hand, checking messages. He didn't even greet me. He poured himself cereal like a child in a hurry. After him came Vivian, wrapped in her satin robe, her forehead wrinkled, as if the whole world bothered her from the first moment. She paused when she saw me sitting there. "And that dress again?" she asked, not hiding her annoyance. "It's comfortable," I said. She looked at me mockingly. "Comfortable for eliciting pity, I assume, like last night." "You were seen. You were seen with him, with that Darin. Is that what you want now? To pretend you're 20 years old again?" Leonard looked up from his phone. "What are you talking about?" he asked, emotionless. "About your mother? About her youthful revival," she said, spitting out the word mother, as if it burned her tongue. I said nothing. I stood up slowly, took my cup, and brought it to the sink. I felt their eyes on me, like small but sharp knives. Leonard followed me into the hall. "Mom," he said quietly. You can't just go out with anyone. No, at your age, it's not proper. People talk. I turned slowly. I looked at him with something that wasn't hatred, but a disappointment so deep it almost hurt my bones. People have always talked, but you, my son, you should be listening to me, not talking to me as if I were a burden. Don't say that, he replied, feigning calm. We just want to help you, to make sure you're okay, that you're taken care of. More than a home. That's what's good. He didn't answer. He ran his hands through his hair uncomfortably, like when he was a child caught in a lie. Vivian just wants what's best. The facilities are good. You'll have activities, people your age, balanced meals, and my house, my things, my life, that doesn't matter anymore. Mom, please, he urged. Think logically. You can't go on like this alone, doing your own thing, without saying where. What if something happens to you? I stepped closer. I took his face in my hands, like I used to when he had a fever as a child and couldn't sleep. You're not worried about me, Leonard. You're tired of me. That's different. He pulled back, annoyed. He said nothing more. He went up the stairs as if fleeing from something he didn't want to admit. The days passed. There were no more dinners. They didn't invite me on their outings. They didn't inform me about anything. They began to act as if I wasn't there, as if they had already gotten me out of the way, a ghost moving silently through the house. They began to take small tasks away from me. Vivian asked the cleaning lady to take care of my room. Leonard took my medications from the medicine cabinet and put them in a locked box so they wouldn't get lost. Every time I came into the kitchen, I found objects moved, different dishes, new instructions taped to the refrigerator. On Sunday, while I was listening to the radio in the living room, they both came down in formal clothes. She in a striking red dress, he in a black suit. We're going to an event at the hospital, he said, without looking at me. And I asked, wasn't I invited? Vivian laughed dryly. What for? To watch them talk about medicine. To pretend you're interested in things you don't understand. I didn't answer. I stayed there, hands in my lap, and watched them leave without looking back. That was the first day I ate nothing. Not from lack of hunger, but because of a lump in my throat that wouldn't let me swallow. That night, I looked for my photo album. I had to remember. I had to understand when my son stopped being mine. There was a specific photo, Leonard, 5 years old, hugging my neck on his first day of school. I was kneeling, smiling. He was too. We were happy. Where did it all break? A week passed. Darin called several times. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed to tell him what I was experiencing. He thought I was strong, that I was taking control, and I was losing every corner of my freedom. One Friday afternoon, after a trivial argument about the volume of the TV, Vivian approached my chair, leaned in, and spoke into my ear as if I were a disobedient child. This house doesn't belong to you anymore, Hilda. Stop acting like it does. I froze. I didn't answer. That night, I wrote in my notebook again. They are dismantling me piece by piece, as if my presence is a stain. I am no longer a mother, no longer a mother-in-law, nothing, just an obstacle they haven't pushed into the abyss yet. The following Saturday, I went out, went to the park, sat on the same bench where I had seen Darin. He didn't come. I wasn't waiting for him. I just sat there, the wind on my face, the sound of children playing in the distance. I closed my eyes and cried. Not like someone who cries from sadness, but like someone who cries because they have nowhere to go. On the way back, I ran into a neighbor, Adele, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. She greeted me warmly, but when she noticed my expression, her tone changed. Is everything all right, Hilda? She asked. I hesitated, but then I said it involuntarily. My son wants to put me in a home. Her eyes widened, her face tensed. But why? You're perfectly lucid. You go out, you cook, you look better than I do. I smiled sadly. Because I'm no longer useful to them. I don't fit in anymore. Adele invited me to her house, poured me tea, listened to me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt seen, heard. She told me I wasn't alone, that there were options, that she knew a woman who helped elderly people take legal control of their property to defend their rights. I wrote down her number, kept it like a treasure. When I got home, Leonard was sitting in the living room reading. He glanced at me furtively. "Where were you?" he asked. "At the park," I answered. "And then at Adele's." His brow furrowed. "You didn't tell me. What if something had happened to you? And what if it hadn't?" I replied. He looked at me angrily, stood up, came toward me as if he wanted to shout, but he controlled himself. "Mom, this is difficult. You have no idea what we do for you." "I don't want you to do anything for me," I said. He left without answering. That night, I called the woman with the number. Her name was Kara, her voice firm, direct. She asked me to meet her in a week, to prepare documents, to bring everything I could. I felt fear, but also something like hope. On Sunday, Darin visited me. I didn't invite him in. We walked around the block. He took my hand. He said nothing. Neither did I. But in that silence, something healed a little. When we returned, Leonard was waiting for me at the door. "I don't like you going out with that man." "I didn't ask for your opinion," I told him. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen on his face before. Fear. And I knew then that my presence still had power. Even if they tried to erase me, I was still here and had no intention of leaving without a fight. Clara had me meet her at a discreet cafe near the old bus terminal, where no one asked many questions. I arrived with the papers in a blue folder. Deeds, birth certificate, old will, copies of my ID. It wasn't much, but it was all I had rescued from the drawer Leonard hadn't locked yet. Clara was already there. She was younger than I had imagined, but with a gaze of steel. She didn't have the sweetness of a social worker or the coldness of a typical lawyer. She was something different. Someone who had seen things. Someone who wasn't surprised by anything. She asked me to sit, ordered me a coffee, and told me bluntly, "You have two options, Hilda. Either you give in or you fight. But if you fight, it has to be now, today. Because if they decide to have you committed tomorrow, it will be harder. And if they manage to change something to their name, you will have no way to reclaim it." I nodded silently. I felt a mixture of dizziness and clarity, like when you realize the fire has already started, and all you can do is decide whether to run or save something. I showed her the documents. She listened to me. She didn't interrupt, just took notes. She asked precise questions. Whose name was the house in? Who paid the bills? Did you have a will? Did you have your own bank account? Did you have debts? It hurt to admit that I didn't. Leonard had gradually taken control of everything, like someone who steals a ring from you while you sleep. First, he convinced me to close my account, to avoid fraud. Mom. Then, that it was better to consolidate everything, that the house was old and needed to be transferred to his name to access certain benefits from the hospital where he worked. "It's temporary, Mom. Just trust me." And I trusted, as mothers trust, who raise children alone, work double shifts, give everything, and expect just a little love in return. Clara didn't judge me, she just sighed. "This will be difficult, but not impossible. First, you need to change your will. You are still lucid. You are in full possession of your faculties. Do you feel capable of giving a statement?" "Yes," I replied. "Then we'll do it. But first, I want you to meet someone." She led me to a small office a few blocks away. There, she introduced me to a slim man with white hair and a kind look. "This is Renato. He works with me. He will help you register your will, to leave everything clear, legal, and recorded." That day, I returned home with a strange feeling. It wasn't victory. It was something rawer. Awareness. I knew I was at war. Not a war of screams and scandals, but a quieter, more dangerous one. Of glances, of silence, of invisible decisions. When I arrived, I found Vivian in the kitchen. She was cutting fruit. She looked at me with that contempt I already knew. "You're late." I was with a friend. "Friend?" she asked mockingly. "Since when do you have friends?" "Since I realized I'm no longer wanted in this house." She didn't answer, but I saw her jaw tighten. I went to my room, closed the door, sat on the bed, and smiled for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, Kara called me. She had scheduled an appointment with a notary. She gave me precise instructions. Go alone, bring ID, speak clearly. We practiced my statement several times. She listened to me, corrected me, gave me confidence. I felt like an actress rehearsing a crucial scene, but it was my life, my voice, my legacy. I went. I signed. They recorded everything. And with that, Kara took the next step. She filed a petition for asset protection. Leonard couldn't move anything without my express consent. The document would take days to validate, but it was on its way. The tension at home grew. They didn't speak to me anymore. Or if they did, it was in short sentences, quietly, as if afraid of waking something they already knew was alive. Leonard started skipping dinner. Vivian locked herself in her room. I used those moments to write, to organize my thoughts, and above all, to plan. One afternoon, Darin picked me up. We went to the square. He took me to a small cafe. He told me about his daughter, his divorce, his loneliness, and for the first time, I told him everything. I didn't edit, didn't soften. I talked to him about Leonard, about Vivian, about how they were dismantling me. He didn't interrupt me, just took my hand. You don't have to stay there. There is a life out there. You know that, right? He said. But knowing it wasn't enough, I had to believe it. That night, Kara sent me a message. Someone will call you. Trust them. It was late. I was almost asleep. The phone rang. It was a woman. Warm, confident voice. Her name was Eleanor. She was a friend of Clara's. She had a house, a kind of boarding house for older women in transition. She explained to me that it wasn't a nursing home, but a community, that everyone had their own space, that they did activities, that they could come and go as they pleased. She invited me to come see it. She told me there was no rush, but the doors were open. The next day, Leonard came into my room without knocking. He had an envelope in his hand. We are going to sign some papers, just to speed up the hospital formalities. Nothing important. What papers? I asked. A power of attorney, so we can represent you in certain matters. I will not sign anything, I said. He paused. What? What you heard. No more signatures, no more deceptions. He was silent. For a few seconds it was as if he didn't understand who I was. Then he frowned. You're letting that man influence you, that Darin. It has nothing to do with Darin. It has to do with me, with who I am, with what I will not allow. That night I heard them arguing. Leonard and Vivian, muffled shouts behind the door. She said I was rebelling, that I was up to something. He said he didn't understand what had changed about me. I realized they were afraid, and that gave me strength. Kara sent me a copy of the official document. It was my support, my shield, my declaration. I read it 3 times. Then I put it under the mattress like a secret that kept me alive. I went to Eleanor's house. It was warm, bright, smelled of freshly baked bread and old books. She showed me a small but adequate room. She offered me coffee. She told me about other women who had gone through the same thing. I felt strange, as if I had entered another world, one where I was welcome, where my voice counted for something. I asked her if I could live there. Whenever you decide, she answered. When I came home, I noticed that things in my room had been moved. My drawer was rummaged through, papers were missing. I ran to the mattress. The folder was still there, closed, intact, but I understood the message. They were looking for something. They were suspicious. And that's when I made the decision. I would leave, not the next day, not next week, but soon, and I would do it silently like a shadow, like a woman being reborn without a sound. 3 days after my visit to Eleanor's house, I received the first veiled threat. It wasn't a shout, not a letter, not even a direct sentence. It was something simpler and more devastating. The absolute silence. Leonard walked through the kitchen while I prepared my coffee and didn't even look at me. Vivian didn't either. The television was on loud, as if they wanted to isolate me from the world, as if my presence were nothing more than background noise, a temporary annoyance. I tried to read but couldn't concentrate. I walked carefully through the house, as if every step could trigger a trap. And then I saw it on the dining table, an open red folder, inside it a contract, a notarized power of attorney. It was already signed by them. Only my signature was missing. It was like an open trap in the middle of a field. My hands trembled. I closed it, left it there, and went back to my room. That night, I didn't eat dinner. Darin texted me. He asked if I was okay. I replied, yes. I lied because the truth was darker. They were closing in on me like prey, like someone who no longer had any value, except as an obstacle. The next morning, Vivian came into my room without knocking. She woke me with her sharp, hurtful voice. "Your son is giving you a chance. Don't be stubborn. Sign. It's just a paper. You won't have to worry about anything anymore. Let the young people handle it." I didn't answer, didn't cry, just looked at her, and something in my gaze must have made her uncomfortable, because she left without saying more. I knew the next step wouldn't be a request, but an effective, legal, cruel action. I locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the hot water. Somehow the steam made me feel less fragile. I took the phone and called Kara. I told her everything. She listened silently. Then she told me, "You have to get out of there this week. Don't wait for them to make their move, because they will. They are desperate. You don't see it, but they are losing control, and that makes them dangerous." I asked her if I could go to Eleanor's house. She said, yes. Eleanor had prepared everything. I could stay there until we had everything legally sorted out, but I had to leave carefully, without notice, without a sound. I felt like a fugitive, but a fugitive from my own home. From my own son. I packed the essentials, some clothes, medications, a book that had belonged to my mother, the folder with the documents, the silver necklace that Leonard never knew I hid among my things. I put it on and waited. I waited until everyone had left. I waited for the perfect moment, but that moment never came, because Leonard came home early that afternoon. He came in with a wrinkled shirt and a furrowed brow. He found me in the living room with the bag next to me, paused. He looked at me. "Where are you going?" "I'm leaving with this bag." "At this time?" I said nothing. I stood up, tried to pass, but he stood in front of me. "Are you running away?" "I don't need to run away from anything. This house is mine, still mine." "Who is putting these ideas in your head?" "That Darin, that lawyer?" "I don't need anyone to put anything in my head. I have lived more than you. I raised you alone. I fought. I endured. And now it's my turn to decide." Leonard took a step closer. For a second, I saw something in his eyes I didn't recognize. Rage. Fear. Despair. "If you walk through that door, don't come back." I paused. I looked at him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. You will have no place to come back to." I moved closer. I put my hand on the doorknob. "I don't need to come back because I don't want to be invisible in my own life again." I opened it, walked out, left without looking back. Eleanor received me with a gentle smile. She had tea ready. She showed me the room. It was simple. It had a window that led to a small garden. The other women greeted me shyly. One gave me a scarf. Another offered me a dried flower she had kept in a book. I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. That night, I slept like I hadn't since my husband's death, without fear, without hurtful voices, without the feeling that something in me no longer mattered. But the peace was short-lived. On the second day, Kara called me. She had news. Leonard had tried to file a document at the registrar's office. He claimed I was not capable of making decisions for myself. He wanted to have me declared legally incompetent. My legs trembled, but Kara was prepared. She had anticipated this move. She asked me to go to the doctor she had worked with before, a serious, upstanding doctor. He assessed my mental state. He asked me questions, gave me tests, exercises. In the end, he signed a clear certificate. Full consciousness, intact judgment, solid memory. It was my legal shield. Kara filed it immediately, nullifying Leonard's attempt, but it wasn't the end. I received a short, cruel message from him. "You are old, you are alone. No one will put up with you anymore." I read it, deleted it, not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer defined me. I was no longer the woman who begged for a place at the family table. Not anymore. The days in Eleanor's house passed like a bomb. We cooked together, read, watched old movies, laughed, talked about our dead, about our past triumphs, about our most intimate worries. Each brought her scars, and together we healed them. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was just a refuge, a pause. Darin came to visit me, brought a bag of fruit, sat next to me, took my hand. "You look different. Better or worse. More yourself." I was moved, not because he said something romantic, but because for the first time someone saw me. Not as a burden, not as an obstacle, not as someone's mother. He saw me, Hilda, a living woman. That night, While writing in my notebook, I received another message from an unknown number. If you don't come back this week, we will initiate the conservatorship proceedings. You won't even be able to decide where you sleep. A chill ran down my spine. I showed Kara the message. She read it. She was silent. Then she said, "It's time to counterattack." Kara acted with a speed that surprised me. The day after the message, she had already drafted a preventive legal response. She explained to me that while Leonard had no basis for a conservatorship, he had resources, connections, and the necessary cruelty to make the process long, humiliating, and grueling. What they wanted was not to take care of me. It was control. It was to take possession of the little I had built. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Clara arranged an appointment with a retired judge who had been her colleague. An older woman with a firm voice, sharp eyes, and skin furrowed by experience, not weakness. She listened to me for an hour. She didn't interrupt a single time. At the end, she told me something I will never forget. Don't let anyone take away your right to live your life, not even your children. That same afternoon, we signed an official objection to the conservatorship attempt. A document was also attached clarifying that Leonard and Vivian had no authority to act legally on my behalf. It was my shout on paper, an act of defense, of dignity, but the emotional blows continued to hit me. One of the women in the house, Guadalupe, found me crying in the garden one afternoon. I sat on the grass, unable to hold my composure. She sat next to me in silence. She offered me a tangerine. We shared the segments. The silence between us was more healing than any word. She asked me if I wanted to talk. I told her the basics, not the details, but the pain. She looked at me tenderly. I went through something similar. My daughter told me I embarrassed her, that my quirks were a burden, that she didn't want her husband to see me in old clothes. She locked me in a room for months. I didn't have a key, but I had nowhere to go, until one day I left and didn't come back. The hardest part wasn't leaving, but accepting that I would never see her again. I felt her words pierce my chest, because I knew that this grief, the grief of a mother who accepts that her son has chosen to hurt, is a grief without comfort. That night, Darin came for dinner. He brought freshly baked bread, red wine, a dried flower between the pages of a book. We all sat at the communal table, laughed, talked. He looked at me as if rediscovering me. As if I were a story that was just beginning. I felt beautiful. Even though I had gray hair, even though my hands trembled, even though my years outnumbered my certainties, I felt desired, alive. After dinner, we went out on the porch. The air was cool. The stars twinkled above us as if they knew our secret. He took my hand. "Remember when we danced at the fair?" I had never forgotten. He kissed me slowly, tenderly, as one kisses someone who has waited for years. It was the first sincere kiss I had received since my husband's death. It wasn't passion. It was something deeper, purer. But the peace was interrupted. The next day, we received a notification. Leonard had hired a new lawyer, more aggressive, more media-savvy. He demanded a forced psychiatric evaluation. He wanted to show that my escape was a symptom of dementia, that my relationship with Darin was inappropriate, that I was being manipulated by third parties with financial interests. The judge didn't accept the immediate request, but left the door open. Kara was furious. They are playing dirty. They will use your age, your gender, your history against you, but you will not be silent. No, we said. Now we organize an informal hearing, a space to testify, to speak, to show who I was, and who was trying to reduce me to a signature and a pension. When I sat in that small room with 4 people in front of me and my folder in my hands, I felt my heart leap out of my chest. I remembered the births, remembered the feverish mornings, remembered the times I sold my jewelry to pay for the school uniforms. I saw my reflection in the glass of a window. I saw myself as old, yes, but not defeated. I took a deep breath, spoke about my childhood, my marriage, my widowhood, how I raised my son alone, how I helped him buy his first car, how I often had to go hungry so he could eat, how over the years his affection became a demand, his love a duty, how his wife looked at me as if I sullied the living room just by entering. I spoke of the nights they left me alone, of the times I pretended to be asleep so as not to hear the mockery, how I began to feel superfluous in my own home, how my son told me one day that I couldn't live there anymore. and how I decided not to die of sadness. When I finished, no one clapped, but one of the women on the committee had tears in her eyes. Another nervously cleaned her glasses. They asked me to wait outside. Kara came out with me, hugged me. No matter the outcome, today you took a huge step. You are no longer the shadow they wanted to paint. You are a voice. That night, Darin cooked me soup. He brought me a handkerchief embroidered by his mother. He told me if I wanted, we could go to his country house together. That there was space. That I didn't have to decide now. But that I should know I wasn't alone. I cried, not from sadness, but from relief, because I felt that despite everything, there was still love. Unconditional love, without contracts, without threats. The next day, the committee's response came. They saw no reason to allow the conservatorship. There was no evidence, no medical justification. The attempt was unfounded and motivated by unresolved family conflicts. They denied the request. They signed with clear letters. Kara showed it to me with a smile. We won this one, but don't let your guard down. And then, as if I had sensed it, came another blow. Leonard came to Eleanor's house in person. He didn't come in. He shouted from the street. You ungrateful person! You gave us up, all for some stinking old man and a few crazy nursing home residents. I didn't come out. I didn't answer, but my legs were shaking. Eleanor came out, looked at him. Get out! There is no shouting here, no abuse here. A woman lives here who is worth more than your ego. Respect her. Leonard left, cursing. But I knew he would come back, that he wouldn't accept his defeat. That night, I slept in my clothes, in case I had to leave, but nothing happened. Just silence, a silence full of respect, protection, true affection. I woke up with a letter under my door. It was from Guadalupe. Never let them decide for you. Not with papers, not with shouts, not with guilt. You are still the mistress of your story. I kept it in my notebook. It was my new amulet. I woke up before the sun came up. I had slept badly. My body was tense, as if my skin was already expecting the next blow. But when I opened my eyes, something had changed. It wasn't fear. It was something different. It was a new feeling, a deep calm. I sat up in bed, looked at my hands, the same ones that once changed diapers, that later served plates, dried tears, folded shirts, signed school permission slips, and that now held my present as if it were a fragile piece of paper. I took a deep breath. That day, I wasn't afraid. Leonard hadn't reappeared since the last humiliation, and I no longer thought of him as an executioner. I thought of him as a lost son, not because of me, but because of himself. Eleanor prepared me an iced tea. We sat at the table like two teenagers planning an escape. She asked me if I was still thinking about leaving with Darin. I nodded, but on one condition. Not to flee, but to depart. I didn't want to feel like I was running away. I wanted to feel like I was choosing. She helped me check the things I wanted to take. There weren't many. Comfortable clothes, my diaries, old photos, a few necklaces, the silver one I was wearing the day Leonard told me about the home. I wouldn't leave that one behind. It was a witness to my rebirth. We set a date. In a week, I would leave with Darin. We would settle in his country house, a few hours away. It wasn't an exile. It was a horizon. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Lena, my former neighbor's daughter, a young woman who had grown up watching me help everyone. She told me she had seen a post from Vivian on social media. A photo of me, taken without my consent, accompanied by a manipulative text. Mental illness isn't always visible. Sometimes one makes dangerous decisions. There were hundreds of comments, people opining without knowing anything, some terrible, others doubtful. I saw how they were trying to paint me as crazy, unstable, as if the act of falling in love, of remaking my life, of not wanting to live in my son's house, was a sign of imbalance. My heart tightened, but I didn't cry. I called Kara, sent her the screenshot. Shortly after, she wrote back, "Don't answer. We will act. This is defamation." She initiated the legal proceedings for defamation. It was formal. It was cold. It was just... Darin found out about the post, hugged me silently. Afterward, he showed me a photo album. His mother had also been condemned by her family when she decided to live alone. They accused him of not taking care of her, of abandoning her. There will always be people who prefer the version that reassures them, he told me, but that doesn't change the truth. A few days later, I received another letter. This time it was from Leonard. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed, cold, addressed me by my full name, and demanded I appear at a family meeting at his house, that if I didn't, they would initiate legal proceedings to challenge my recent decisions. I wanted to tear it up, but I didn't. I kept it, not for him, but for me, as proof of what I would no longer allow. Eleanor looked at me calmly. Are you going? No, I owe them no explanations. I was patient. I was a mother. Now I am a woman and a whole woman. The day before my departure with Darin, we held a small dinner at the house. Guadalupe prepared her favorite rice. A neighbor brought cornbread. Clara came with a bottle of cheap and delicious wine. We all sat in the garden. Warm lights, sincere laughter. They gave me a new notebook with a dedication. So you can keep writing your story. My hands trembled with emotion. I felt that for the first time in many years, I was surrounded by family, not of blood, but of soul. That night, before falling asleep, I looked out the window. The shadows were long, the silence deep. I felt no fear. I felt gratitude. The next day, Darin arrived early. He had cleaned his car. He opened the door for me like in the movies. I got in with a calm heart. Before he started the car, he asked me if I was ready. I told him I didn't know, but I was determined. That was enough. The journey was long but beautiful. The landscape changed gradually. The air became purer. The city lay behind us like a healed wound. Upon arrival, his house was more modest than I had imagined, but it was full of light. Plants, books, simple but well-kept details. He showed me my room. It had a white bed, a woven blanket, an old lamp. I sat on the edge. For the first time, I felt that this place could be mine, without anyone charging me for it. The first few days were an adjustment. Darin respected my silences. He didn't force me to talk. We cooked together, went for walks. Sometimes we held hands. Sometimes we just shared the same bench and looked at the trees. I started writing short stories, memories, dialogues. I felt my mind opening up, like a field after the rain. But Leonard didn't give up. He sought me out through his lawyer. He sent a new request, this time to demand a routine medical examination. He wanted to create the impression that my disappearance was worrying, that he was acting for my well-being. Kara responded officially. Mrs. Schwartz is in full possession of her faculties. She is living by her own decision. She requires neither guardianship nor supervision. Every time he tried to push, he hit a wall. The hardest part came in an unexpected call. Leonie, my granddaughter. She called me from a blocked number. She was crying. She told me she didn't understand what was happening, that her father and mother told her I was sick, that I had left with a man who was manipulating me, that they just wanted to protect me, but that nothing made sense. I asked her to listen to my voice, to tell me if I sounded sick. She was silent. She cried harder. Grandma, I miss you. It was like a dagger to the chest. I told her I missed her too, that when she was older, she would understand, that I loved her, that she shouldn't let the adults' hatred rob her of love. I don't know if she understood, but she hung up with a thank you that tore me apart. That night, Darin saw me cry for the first time since I had arrived. He hugged me, said nothing, prepared me a tea, stroked my hair, as if he knew that words are superfluous when the soul is broken. The next day, I decided to do one more thing, not for Leonard, but for me. I called a notary, went with Kara. I changed my will, not out of resentment, but out of justice. I named a foundation for elderly women as the beneficiary. What I had, even if little, would help others like me. Women who were mothers, wives, caregivers, and whom one day someone had tried to make invisible. I signed with a smile. It wasn't revenge. It was a legacy. When I came home, Darin was waiting with a package. It was an old notebook. On the cover it said, "For when you feel like starting over." I opened it to the first page. His handwriting. "You are the bravest story I have ever read." I cried. But not from sadness, but from fullness. That morning, I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't fear, nor was it calm. It was as if my body knew something was about to happen. I dressed slowly. A blouse that Darin said made me look radiant, although I didn't believe it. While we were having breakfast, the mailman left a large envelope at the door. Kara had already warned me that new notifications would arrive, but this one was different from the previous ones. It didn't have an official letterhead or a law firm seal. It was handwritten. I opened it carefully. It was photos, many of me and Darin, walking through the town, going into the house, sitting in the square, laughing. There was a letter, unsigned, just a few lines, written shakily. I'm watching everything. You are not well. This isn't going to end here. The blood froze in my veins. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a threat. Darin noticed it in my face. He gently took the photos from me, read them silently. Afterward, he looked at me with a firmness I didn't know he had. This is no longer just manipulation. This is harassment. We are going to put an end to this once and for all. We called Kara. I sent her pictures of the envelope. She asked me not to touch anything else. In less than 2 hours, she was on her way. When she arrived, she had a slim man with her, with a serious face and a steady gaze. He was a private investigator. Kara had hired him. I didn't understand what could be done. He explained to me that taking photos on public property wasn't illegal, but that the content, the context, and the intimidation very well could be a crime. They checked the area, found a hidden camera on a nearby pole. There was no doubt. They were spying on me. Kara proposed a radical solution, to file a formal complaint for harassment. I never thought I would have to do something like that against my own son. But it was no longer about motherhood. It was about dignity. The next day, we went to the prosecutor's office. I testified to everything, from the psychological pressure, the threats, the surveillance, to the public manipulation on social media. They listened to me, took me seriously. I left with an official file that, for the first time in a long time, made me feel protected by the law. I was no longer alone, not entirely. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about Leonard, about the child he was, about the man he had become. When had he crossed the line? Was it out of frustration, out of fear, out of cruelty? I wondered if there was anything left inside him of the son who hugged me when I dreamed of monsters, or if there was nothing left. Darin held me in bed. He said nothing, just covered me with a thicker blanket, as if he could protect me from the invisible. The following days were tense. Kara received a court summons. Leonard had launched a counterattack. He filed a lawsuit to challenge my legal capacity, alleging I was being manipulated by Darin and was incapable of making decisions. He had even gotten a fake medical report from an alleged psychiatrist claiming I was suffering from delusions of persecution. It was clumsy, but it had weight. Kara explained to me that this tactic was common in cases of inheritance and asset control, that many children use the courts to legally incapacitate their parents and take control. I felt sick, not from fear but from disgust. My son had crossed a line from which there was no return. The preparation for the defense was exhausting. We had to gather evidence, testimonies, even a real psychological evaluation. They interviewed me for hours, gave me memory and logic exercises, asked me about my life, my plans, my fears. I did it all with composure, without embellishing, without hiding my pain, because it wasn't a test of perfection. It was a test of humanity. The day of the hearing came faster than expected. I appeared in a navy blue dress and my silver necklace. Darin took my hand before we went in. Kara carried a briefcase full of documents, recordings, photos, and the real medical report that refuted the fake one. When we entered the room, I saw Leonard. He didn't look at me. He seemed tense, but not with remorse, with arrogance. Vivian was by his side, her face harder than ever. She looked like a stone. When I sat down, I felt my body vibrate, not with fear, but with strength. The judge, a woman with a stern face, read the documents, asked, listened, gave each party the floor. Leonard repeated that I was acting out of control, that Darin had alienated me from my family, that my judgment was clouded. He said it with a firm voice, without trembling, but he didn't look me in the eye. He spoke as if reading a script. Afterward, Kara spoke, showed the evidence, the fake report, the real one, the anonymous letter, the photos of the harassment, the detective's statement, and finally, my testimony. I was allowed to speak. I stood up. I didn't speak to the judge. I spoke into the air, as if speaking to myself, to the woman I was, and to the one I am. I told my story without exaggeration, without drama. I spoke of my son, my grandchildren, my lonely days, of the time they told me they would put me in a home, how I didn't react with hatred, but with a dinner and a necklace, how I decided not to disappear, but to reappear. When I finished, the judge was silent. No one breathed, not Leonard, not Vivian. The ruling was clear. There was no evidence of incapacity. The lawsuit was dismissed. An investigation for document forgery and harassment was opened. Leonard was exposed, not as a concerned son, but as a man capable of betraying the one who gave him life. When I left the courthouse, I felt the air was less heavy. Not because I had won, but because I no longer owed myself silence. Kara hugged me, said, "Justice was done today, Hilda. It's not everything, but it's a lot." Darin kissed my forehead. We walked down the street together as if reborn. That night we made lentil soup at home. We played music, we toasted with water. We didn't need more. I sat down to write, but not a letter and not a diary. I wrote a story about a woman who was supposed to be locked up one day, but she opened the door and walked out. I don't remember exactly when I knew my life would never be the same again. It wasn't the day of the hearing or when I received the verdict in my favor. It was a completely ordinary morning, while I was watering the plants on the balcony and felt something special in my chest. Space. A feeling of fresh air inside, as if every corner of my silence finally belonged to me. I sat in the rocking chair. The sun hit my face. I closed my eyes and smiled, not because of something happening outside, but because of what was no longer happening. Inside. The weeks after the trial were quiet, but not empty. Kara visited me often, always with good news. The investigation against Leonard was progressing. They had suspended his request for control over my property, and the village community, which had previously shunned me, now greeted me with respect. I had gone from being the elderly lady of the house with a garden to the woman who defended herself alone. This didn't fill me with pride like a medal, but it didn't shame me either. It was simply part of my story. Leonard didn't seek me out again, didn't call, didn't write. Vivian also disappeared. I didn't know if out of shame, anger, or cowardice. The grandchildren initially sent 2 lukewarm messages. One said, "Grandma, I hope you are well," and another, "Dad says you are confused. I don't know what to believe." I didn't answer, not because I didn't love them, but because I no longer needed to convince anyone of who I was. I knew who I was, and that was enough. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer I hadn't opened in years, I found a small notebook with worn covers. It was a recipe book in my mother's handwriting. I flipped through the pages with trembling fingers. There were oil stains, margin notes, little drawings. I sat in the kitchen and prepared one of those recipes, rice soup with pumpkin. The aroma filled the house, as if time were going backward. Darin arrived just as I was serving it. He looked at me silently. "Hilda, you know what this means." I smiled at him. Yes, it's memory, and I have it very clear. Darin proposed something unexpected. "Let's go." At first I thought he was joking. "Where to?" "Anywhere where we aren't the ones from the past, where we can be what we can still be." I didn't answer him right away, but that night, while writing in the garden, I knew. I had already closed all the internal doors. I was no longer afraid. I could move not out of pain, but out of freedom. In less than a month, I sold the house. It wasn't easy. Every room had an echo of me, but every echo was now part of a story that didn't need to be repeated. I kept only a few things. My mother's notebook, the silver necklace, a photo with my sister, and a letter I had written to myself. I put it in the last drawer of the wardrobe, in case I ever returned. Never forget what you experienced, but don't stay living there either. We said goodbye to the town on a gray morning. Clara took us to the terminal. We hugged tightly. She didn't cry, I did. But it was a gentle cry, like someone watering new land. She promised to visit us. I believed her. We set off without a fixed destination, just with 2 suitcases and the certainty that time is not measured in clocks, but in decisions. The first place we went was a coastal town, where no one knew us. We rented a small white house with large windows. The sea could be heard from the living room. We walked along the shore every afternoon. We bought bread at a small shop that smelled of firewood. I wore a hat. Darin took photos of me, said, "I have never seen you so alive." I replied, "I was only surviving before." In the nights I sometimes woke up startled, dreaming of voices, of shouts, of absences. But when I looked beside me and saw him sleeping peacefully, I understood that I was no longer there, that time no longer dominated me. I learned to fall asleep again without fear. I began to write short stories, not about me, but about imaginary women who discover they can start over. One of them was published in a local newspaper. They asked me for an interview. I laughed. I told them I didn't want to be famous, that I had had enough attention for one lifetime. But I agreed. In the interview, they asked me what my greatest achievement was. I answered without hesitating, finding my voice again. One day, while we were drinking coffee, Darin looked at me tenderly. "Do you know what I like about you?" "What?" "That you don't have to be strong all the time, and yet you are." That night, I sat in front of the mirror, looked at myself for a long time. I saw my wrinkles, my tired eyes, but I also saw something new. Peace. Months passed. We lived simple days, uneventful days, days with wind, with rain, with sun, days when nothing happened, but in which everything inside me changed. I learned to walk slowly, to eat slowly, to listen to the sea like someone listening to advice. One morning, a letter arrived. It was from Leonie, the wife of my eldest grandchild. She asked for my forgiveness. She told me she understood many things now, that the story she had been told didn't match the truth. She told me she wanted to meet me, that she would like to invite me for a coffee if I was ever in her city. I read it silently, folded it carefully. I didn't cry, but I felt something gentle, warm in my heart. It wasn't forgiveness. It was understanding. I didn't answer right away. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I've learned that not all stories need to be closed. Some just need to open a little to let in light. Today I write these lines from a bench by the sea. The sky is pink. Darin is walking with a book in his hand. He looks at me from a distance, waves. I laugh. I raise my hand. Yes, everything has changed, but not suddenly. It began to live with love when I let go of the need to be the perfect mother and accepted being the woman who still breathes. If someone reads this one day, let them know it is never too late to be again, that the bravest thing is not to confront a son or win a trial, but to stay standing when everyone expects you to collapse. It is to look back without hatred and to walk on without noise, to where the soul can finally rest. My name is Hilda Schwartz. They told me I was useless. I was a burden. I should disappear. But I decided to put on my silver necklace and open the door, not to leave, but to find myself. If you like my story, you can encourage me to write more stories by sending me a donation. I thank you infinitely. Yeah.